In this video, the first in our series, we'll be discussing some major trends in library web systems. Rather than discussing particular products or platforms, mostly, since those are going to vary wildly by whatever institution you're at, we'll be taking a higher level look at the whole picture, what things look like, and where things are going in the next half of a decade. The first thing that we need to figure out is, for any given system, who administrates it. Typically, they're going to have three main entities in an academic institution. There's library IT, which could be one person or an entire department, depending on your size. There's central IT, the IT support for the entire campus. In rare instances, library support is included in that, but usually not. And the third major type are your vendors. You're going to see a lot more of these in the last few years, especially as things move into the cloud. There is no cloud. The cloud is just someone else's computer. In this case, it's the vendor's computer. So there's no illusion there. And now vendor contracts, those are possible to be held with central IT, with library IT, or with really any other unit on campus. So trying to get all the different players together to coordinate systems can be really, really difficult. It's even more challenging as more services are made smaller and more atomic and into web services, which are data or actions presented for machines by machines. So an example, authentication. The best possible user experience would be to have a single username and password for all of your university accounts. Chances are there's a service that's offered by Central IT that most of their own services are plugged into, but how do you connect your library services like your ILS or course reserves to that kind of thing? What about a vendor-offered service like a discovery layer? To get all these pieces together, you have to have lots of different players talking, and that can be different because different groups have different priorities. Central IT may be way more concerned about security. A vendor may be more concerned about maintaining easy operations. They don't want to do anything particularly special or strange for your university and not for any other customer. So, no easy feat. But once you have figured out who's running a particular system, you can start looking at what can be done with that system. Do you have full access to the code and the permissions? Is this an open source product that library IT is running that you have total access to and you can change anything? Is it a module or a plugin based system that you can upload new code if you can sort of send things up to be vetted, maybe by central IT? Is there a web interface that you can do a limited set of configurations, maybe drop in a footer here, change a color there for some vendor platform? Once you know that, you have a much better idea of what you can do to make your systems that much more robust. So what are we talking about making systems more robust? Well, the first major thing, and it's a little passé at this point, is mobile. I mean, since the iPhone came out in 2010, right? 2010, it's been growing, and now to the point where it's just expected that you have something that functions on mobile. The library industry is still playing a lot of catch up here, and so chances are you may run across a make it mobile kind of project in your work. There are several major ways of doing that. The first and sort of traditional way is the separate mobile site. Now, the separate mobile site is, again, the old way of doing it because you have to maintain the same content in two places. And not only that, but you have to decide on when someone sees one site versus the other. Sure, a desktop is going to get the regular site and a phone's going to get the mobile, but what about an iPad? What about an iPad mini, iPad Pro? The next major approach is to make an app. This has sort of been the go-to approach for a lot of years. And there are a number of advantages for doing that. If you make an app, you have access to push notifications, you have access to the device's camera, you have access to the accelerometer for measuring vibration or tilt or angular arrangement. You have access to Bluetooth, which can allow you to talk to lots of different devices, including location beacons and those kind of things. It's pretty cool. But chances are you're not actually going to take advantage of that with at least an introductory library mobile offering. That requires some very specific external hardware, some very sort of planning, and it requires programmers who can program not only in iOS but Android, because you're living in a multi-OS mobile environment, and we'll just ignore Windows Mobile because it never really took off. So you've got to have additional programmers. If you have them and you have the desire to build something that's really going to make use of these sort of local built-in functions of the camera, great, go for it. But chances are that's more hassle than it's worth. So the next major approach, and this is sort of the current standard, is responsive design. Responsive design allows you to build a single site that works on any screen size. There are numerous frameworks that can help you get started with this, but regardless of which one you pick, whether it's Twitter's Bootstrap is a major example, or Zurb Foundation, whichever you choose, you still have to do a lot of testing and tuning to get it right, to get it to work with your content. You need to be aware of how space works on your particular site. But the end result of all that is you maintain the content in one place, and it works on all mobile platforms, no installation required, future-proof. So it's definitely the way to go, at least in my opinion, if you're not making use of app-specific sort of functionality. Another major point to consider when working with web application is accessibility. There have been a lot of major legal cases in the last few years that have really drove home the point that public institutions are responsible for providing accessible sites. If you're interested in learning more about this, Penn State University and the Dear Colleague letter are good keywords to start looking for. There are several things that you can do fairly quickly to provide quick accessibility fixes. One simple thing is to provide alt text for all your images. This may sound a little simplistic, but it goes a long way when you can't see the image to at least have some kind of description of what it is. Use descriptive link text. Things like click here don't tell the user anything. Assistive technologies will pull out the links in a page and present them to the user, reading out what they are. And when it says click here, that gives them no indication whatsoever of where they would be going. Putting in something a little bit more descriptive like the title of the page or the subject of the content really helps there. Additionally, adding a skip to content link at the top of your page, so your user, when this assistive technology is reading the page, can jump over all those menus and boilerplate that you have at the top that's on every single page that makes your site look like your site. They don't need to read that every single time, so skip to content's a really polite thing to do for them. Keeping a minimum of 10-point font. I'd recommend more like 12 or 14, but 10 is considered to be the minimum for being actually visible on a screen. Properly nested HTML header tags, so H1 first, then H2. Don't use your header tags to style your content. Oh, I want it to be big and bold, I'll use H2. Look at it semantically. What's the first header? What's the second header? How would you nest these? What's the bigger topic and the narrower subtopics? And then use CSS or the cascading style sheets to actually make it visually look how you want it to look. And the last major quick fix recommendation is to maintain sufficient contrast. Putting light colored text on a light background is not good for anyone. There are recommended guidelines. We'll get into specifics on those a little bit later when we get to some of the more complex fixes, which, here they are now. Accessibility is no easy thing. It's not something you can just do quick fixes on and kind of just done, but you can get a long way with the initial start. And when you have to go further, here's some things that you may want to look at. Providing a reasonable tab through of focusable elements. The way that the document is written, the order that the content's in, may not be the visual order, the order that you're intending to present it to a user. So since assistive technologies often navigate elements with the tab key, there's a way of providing sort of a natural flow of this element, then that element, in case your document flow and your visual flow don't really line up. Accessible forms is another major one, especially validation. If you have an error message that comes up from putting in the wrong kind of information, say it's not formatted as a number or an email address, you need to be able to provide that back in an accessible way. And accessible JavaScript is another major one. JavaScript is notorious for being problematic. In a lot of cases, you can use cascading style sheets. The version 3, the latest one, CSS 3, allows you to do lots of things like accordion menus. You don't have to do JavaScript with those anymore. You can do it entirely with styling. For those things that you still need to use JavaScript, you may want to look at Aria. I won't go into too much depth with it because it's extremely complex, but it does provide a lot of ways of actually making your JavaScript accessible. For more information about accessibility and where to go with that and want to do, take a look at WCAG 2.0 AA. It's a standard that's put out describing various things that your site should be able to do, and not necessarily just in technical terms, but also in human terms. So really the best way to test accessibility is to actually use assistive technologies and experience the web like your user does. You can download free browser extensions that will help with this. There are screen reader programs built into most operating systems now. Mac and iOS and Linux and Windows too all have those kind of things that allow you to hear your site. Be willing to close your eyes, and for being able to trace motor disabilities and keyboard navigation, unplug your mouse. You'll quickly find out how incredibly frustrating it can be to navigate a site by sound alone. In this era of ever-shrinking budgets, you're probably going to be asked as an academic library to show your value, show why you're worth having money thrown at you. So enter the age of data-driven assessment and analytics. One major analytics platform is Google Analytics, and this is where I actually talk about a particular product because chances are this is what you're going to use. It's an extremely common way of doing what you need to do. You can take just a snippet of code that they give you, drop it into a page, and you're recording page visits in no time. You get a lot of really great data for minimal effort. Yeah, unfortunately, this is not enough. Just dropping code into your site is not going to help you actually assess much of anything. You need to have a plan up front. You need to have definite goals on what you hope for your site to achieve, what you're trying to do. What is success? What is value? How do you measure those things? This is going to require the buy-in of your top-level administrators. You're going to have people actually say, this is how I translate student success into a metric that you can capture. Thankfully, once you've done that, Google Analytics is more than happy to accommodate pretty much whatever you can come up with. The really cool thing is that this actually can go beyond just web page hits. Using relatively cheap and simple hardware, it's possible to now record data from sensors in the real world and bring that data into the web. So for example, door counts, brake beam sensors, noise levels could all be used to help understand how much usage a space is getting. This is referred to as the Internet of Things. You'll see a lot of it especially in vendor talks, of being able to provide sort of unified solutions for this sort of stuff. But it's pretty cool. Another possible sort of combination of these things is building mobile platforms, mobile pages that allow you to do assessment in a space. Since you can take an iPad or phone around with you in a space and answer questions, you can create a mobile-enabled form to go and be able to sort of do this kind of assessment. You definitely have to consider ergonomics. Are you holding it in one hand? Are you holding it in two? How do you get to the buttons on this sort of thing? So there is a component of accessibility in that as well. And then where are you sending the data on this form? Is it just going into a web form? Is it coming out as an email? Are you sending it to Google Analytics? There's lots of different ways of doing it, but sort of the blending of these three sort of things is like a head counts kind of thing, or desk interactions. In our next video, Sarah will be talking a lot more about more ways to integrate technology in an academic library space, especially in support of the evolving pedagogical practices in higher ed. So stay tuned, and thank you for watching.